How will the timing of birds' migrations compare and populations compare to past years? That's another thing Great Backyard Bird Count can tell us. And how are birds affected by West Nile and other communicable diseases or other diseases that they might pick up along the way? Again, bird populations. What different birds might appear in Lower Frederick that don't appear in Skipack Village, for example. So you might see differences in the count of birds, the number of species, the diversity of species, depending on what part of town you're in. And what about declines? Are there any that are going through declines or maybe increases in their population? That happens too sometimes. It's not all, the sky is falling. There's actually some good news in that. Some birds are doing quite well. It's the specialized birds that are sort of habitat-specific birds, like grassland birds or wetland birds, that have a hard time. But the ones that adapt to our suburban and more rural communities are actually doing pretty well. Meadowlark is actually one that's not doing well. It needs a lot of grassland to breed. So whenever I talk about the Great Backyard Bird Count, the biggest question is, how do I count birds in my backyard? I mean, first there's 4, then there's 10, then there's 1. How do I know exactly that I'm not counting the same bird over and over again? Well, this is an American goldfinch. This is summer breeding plumage, so they don't look like this in the summer. I mean, in the wintertime, they look more like this. I get a lot of calls this time of the year. Where are all my goldfinches? They're all gone. Well, they're not. They do tend to disperse this time of the year, but they kind of look like this. They're kind of dull, and they don't always hang out in the feeder. But they travel in flocks, and at this time of the year also, when there's no snow on the ground, they're very comfortable with natural food sources. There's lots of seed around, and they're pretty good at finding them. So one bird, you see one bird at your feeder, you put down you write down goldfinch, and you put a 1, and then a little bit later, 4. There's actually one behind there on the bottom. You can see the bottom bird. There's 4. You cross out the 1 and you put a 4. So now you haven't doubled up. You've just counted the most birds at any given time. So then a little bit later in the day, 14 birds show up. You cross out the 4. Now you're at 14. That's what you're going to record. And if you're a fanatic, I don't know, 100 or something. I don't know how many birds are here, but these are all goldfinches. This is actually from, a lot of my bird pictures are from a woman in Alabama who has her backyard, she's like in a, what do they call it, like a bottleneck of migration. And so she gets tons of birds, and in the wintertime she puts out all these feeders. And these are thistle socks. Goldfinches like thistle. It's a small, expensive seed. Niger thistle, it's also called. And they will come to it. You don't have to have a fancy feeder. You can get one of these socks. It's like a mesh sock, and the birds will pick it out of there. And they love being upside down. It's very natural for them to be upside down. They usually feed on deadhead flowers, which usually droop, and then the bird goes up underneath and upside down and gets the seed out of there. So that's how you count the birds in your backyard. It's very simple. You just keep crossing out until you get the most, when you see the most. And that's the number you scored at the end of the day, or the end of the 15 minutes. Really, they only require you to do it 15 minutes a day. So if you just do it one day for 15 minutes and submit a checklist, you're in good shape and you're contributing to the science. If you've never bird watched or counted birds before, or really took a good close look at birds, bird watchers look for field marks. And to know field marks and to look for field marks, you just sort of want to familiarize yourself with parts of a bird, because those are the things that will tell you what kind of bird it is. There's some birds that are very similar looking. The good news about winter is we only have about, I would say, 30 birds that you really have to know, and a lot of them don't look alike. In fact, they're very different, in fact. And so, but knowing parts of the bird, if you want to go on to become a warbler watcher, especially in the fall when they all look the same, it's good to know body parts and field marks and things like that. Some birds have stripes, some birds are solid, some birds have a white throat. It's all different, and it's good to know parts of the bird. And then if you go out with birders, and they may point out a particular field mark, you want to be able to find that. So sides, belly, flank, head, crown, bill, things like that. Pretty basic stuff. The head is, especially with sparrows, very important because the colors change. There's stripes and eye lines, and we call them mustaches or malar stripes and throats. I'll show you some examples of that. The color of the beak might indicate a particular species. So that's something with, especially with sparrows and then warblers at certain times of the year. It's good to know this stuff. But the more you bird, the more you learn. It's pretty easy. This is a field sparrow. We do have them in the area, and you see that has an eye ring. It has a sort of a white line around it. Not every bird has that, and certainly not every sparrow has that. Bill color is sort of a pinkish. It has that supercilium with an eyebrow going back past its eye, and wing bars. Some birds have them. Some birds have 2 wing bars. Other birds have 1 or none. And then leg color is indicated too, sometimes of species. So those are some of the things on this bird that would indicate that. The first thing that jumps out would be the eye ring on a field sparrow. And then when you get really good, you'll be able to tell birds just from their silhouettes. You might have bad lighting or backlight of a bird sitting on a wire or on the ground, and you might only see a silhouette. Certainly if you see one like this, you kind of have an idea that's probably a woodpecker. It's sideways on a tree. There's a lot of western birds in here. But anyway, you'll also learn that birds like particular areas. There's some birds that like to spend their time on the ground, others flitting through a shrub, others on the top of a tree, and that narrows it down. If there's 30 birds, it's going to narrow it down to what that bird is. So here's some of the common birds in our area. That's pretty common, right? And pretty unmistakable. I mean, you see a blue jay, you pretty much can't confuse it. Now, some people call these bluebirds and confuse it with that, but this is a much bigger bird, gregarious, loud. They're here through the winter. They will raid your feeder and fight for position, but they are beautiful. They really are amazing. If you really take a close look, if you've ever found a blue jay wing feather and take a good long look at it, they are really spectacular. And we take them for granted because they're just so common, and they're eating all our seed and chasing all the little birds away. But they're really good and really smart, very smart birds. They can remember where 300 of their plantings are when they put the acorns in the ground. This is a house finch, probably not as red at this time of the year, but a very common bird, a western bird that has moved east over many generations, and now we have them here. You can see the stripes on what we call the flanks, and this reddish color, and includes grayish wings. Not to be confused with this bird, which is a purple finch. This is a northern finch that comes down in the wintertime. You might get these at your feeder, especially here in Lower Frederick. I live in sort of the Amarillo Bluebell area, and we rarely get these here. But here you're more likely to see them because it's a little more rural, a little more green space here, mountains here, and so they like that kind of environment. And you can see that the color is more of a wash. It goes all the way down the flank, and it's more of a raspberry as opposed to that sort of reddish. Although house finches can vary quite a bit. But a nice bird, much broader bill. Although if you didn't see them side by side, it's kind of hard to tell. But so if you see a finch that looks like either of these two, take a closer look or get your bird book out and take a look. Oh, the females they don't have any color at all. So the female purple finches have much bolder stripes. They essentially look the same as the female. This is we call these snowbirds sometimes. When I was a kid, we called them slate-colored juncos. Actually, ornithologists called them slate-colored juncos. They changed the name to dark-eyed juncos. And this is a bird that actually it breeds an hour and a half north of here in the Poconos, and comes down here for the wintertime, migrates through the mid-Atlantic, and this is usually a ground-dwelling bird. This bird's not happy on feeders, but you will see them in your yard. They're attracted to activity in other birds. So if you have a feeder up and birds are coming to it, chances are look on the ground and you'll see these juncos. And sometimes they're hard to see. They're pretty well camouflaged with the ground and the leaves. And they do like leaf litter, and they're very good at kicking up leaf litter with their feet. They kind of kick and jump. And these are the ones that leave. These guys hop. So when you look out in the snow and you see two little bird prints and they're hopping, it's usually a junco. Song sparrow is another year-round sparrow, and the main field marks of this bird, the male and female look alike, are this spot in the middle on the chest or breast, and then these malar strips or stripes, or this mustache. Sometimes they sing in spring, or other times of the year they stand up on the top of a shrub or a tree and do their singing, hence the name. This is a beautiful bird. They're here right now, winter resident. This is a white-throated sparrow. You can see I forget what that part of the bird is called, actually. The yellow is lure, yellow lure is there, and a white throat, and the black and white stripes on the head. Not to be confused with this bird, which is a white crowned sparrow. So you can see they're very similar, but this one has a much more plain chest. If you look at the beak color here, there's the white-throated, and there's the white crown. So you're looking at that field mark, and you'll know. Because at a quick glance, sometimes white-throated can look like white crowns. White crowns are much less common than white-throated, at least down in Amber Bluebell, but they are around, and great bird. Fire on the stripes, eye line, a clear chest. So it's kind of a buffy blue bar there. Undertail coverts are darker and buffier. I don't think that shows anything. Those are the things you're looking for. Again, this is another Western slide. Some of these birds we don't even exist here, but you get the idea that learning the bird is really learning about habitats and resources and what birds need and look for. And certainly a density in a yard like this is great because it'll attract a number of different birds using different levels of habitat, just as they would in a forest. If you go into a forest, you're not going to look at the canopy for hermit thrush, you're going to look down in the understory because some birds that's just the way they're adapted, that's where they live. And that's a big problem in our native forests because of the deer population. Deer like to eat everything in sort of eye level down, and that's where a lot of birds nest, and warblers and thrushes and things like that. So when that's gone, some of those populations have been affected by the unhealth of the forest in our area. You might look at it and see a lot of plants. A lot of those are invasive, exotic plants in our forest today, and provide some resources to birds. But all the native sort of understory in most of the southeast forests are gone due to deer, but that's almost strictly in the southeast I hear. This is actually a very young mockingbird. They do stay through the wintertime. They love things like winterberry holly, things that fruit and persist during the wintertime. During other times of the year, they're primarily insectivores, but they will hang around in the wintertime. They're very territorial and great birds. This is a Carolina wren. We also have house wrens here, but this is the one you primarily see in the wintertime. They'll come to your suet feeder. Very beautiful chestnut brown bird. Notice the eyebrow or supercilium stripe over the eye. The house wren does not have that stripe. This is a bigger bird also, and just this chestnut, this beautiful chestnut color, very uncommon in the bird world, I guess, because there's not too many around here that have it. Carolina chickadee may be the most common small songbird in the area. Pretty distinctive. I think you have to go a little further. Many birders in here. Where do the blackcaps start? Carolina's in. But blackcap chickadees and Carolina chickadees are very similar species, and they overlap in some areas. But down here, we generally get Carolina chickadees. This is a tufted titmouse. Also here throughout the year. Great little gregarious bird, very loud. Easily will take to a nest box, as will the chickadee. Fun to watch. This bird and the chickadee will come to your feeder. They'll take a seed and then they'll go off to a branch and eat it and then come back. Whereas other birds like the house finch and some sparrows will stay at your feeder and just keep eating. This bird will take one and run, eat it on the branch, and then come back for more. But you can see the peach flanks there on the side. There are other titmice in the country, but this is the only one with this sort of pinkish flank here and that black mark on top of the beak. And back to the goldfinch. Again, American goldfinch. Male and female look very similar at this time of the year. Kind of dull, very small. They will come to bird baths, especially. I have a pond that hasn't been running since last summer, and then they come down and, right at the edge of the ice now and are drinking every day. Oh yeah, not this kind of raptor, right? I usually put this in for kids. I have another number of slides for kids. Red-tailed hawk, very common. You see it almost every day. This is the most widespread large hawk in the country. They come in all different kinds of phases and colors, morphs. But in this area, this is generally what they look like. This is actually a juvenile red-tailed hawk. this one's, see how it's very white, very clear spots on its chest. When they get older, this sort of gets more buffy, it gets more yellowish, and their eyes get darker. You see the light eyes on this bird indicates that it's a young bird. Also, the fact that it's on somebody's fence tells you that this bird might not have a whole lot of experience just yet interacting with human beings. So they will show up in places. There's another red-tailed hawk waiting for somebody to land on the feeder. You don't have to worry too much about red-tailed hawks and bird feeders. They generally like larger prey, things like rabbits and squirrels, small cats, things like that. Just kidding. But they will perch near a feeder and wait. Chipmunks, things like that. These are two different birds, actually. The top left is a sharp-shinned hawk, and the bottom right is a Cooper's hawk. We have both in this area. These are forest-dwelling, bird-eating hawks. They're from the group Accipiter, and their number one food is songbirds. And they hunt where birds congregate. That could be in a field, it could be in a forest, it could be at your feeder. So I get a lot of calls each year saying, how do I get rid of the hawk in my backyard? And really the only way to do that is to sort of stop feeding for a while, and maybe they'll go onto your neighbor's yard or whatever. But on the other hand, they're pretty cool to see, and they're amazingly fast. I mean, they go from 0 to 60 in no time. The way this bird moves is quite incredible. And if you want to witness, Mother Nature at its best, watch one of these go after a bird, and from a dead stop to a catch. It's really incredible. Very fast, very small. These are very small birds. The sharp-shin is only a little bit bigger than a blue jay, and the Cooper's is a little bit bigger than that. And these are both mature adults. You can see the red eye, orangey eye on this bird, and they're around. You might not notice them because they're not that big, and they fly over. They might look like a songbird, but if you see birds kind of scatter, go into the evergreens, or just freeze, you know that one of these is around. And they are around. They're very good at sort of being stealthy. There's a closer look. Beautiful bird, here through the wintertime. The nice thing about these birds is that they don't, I get a lot of calls about cats and things like, cats will kill, for the most part, just because they're hardwired to do it. And they don't always eat what they kill. These birds will only leave you'll see a pile of feathers. Everything else has been eaten. And they only eat what they need. When they're full, they're full. They don't keep killing birds just because they can. They also take usually the weakest or the oldest, sort of that natural selection thing. So don't feel bad in your backyard if they take the bird. They love doves, love mourning doves. A lot of meat on those birds. This is a merlin. It's a small falcon. Usually more in the farm areas, forest edge, things like that. Tough bird to see, but a beautiful flyer, amazing. I mean, it's a falcon. It's one of the best flyers in the bird kingdom, bird world. And we have them here. Here's a winter shot of a merlin flying. Beautiful bird. You can see the eyebrows there, indicating merlin. It's like a little peregrine, actually. And I know somebody was talking about a bald eagle, and we do have them here. Saw one I'm based at Mill Grove, which is right down Valley Forge Road, towards Valley Forge Park, and one flying right over the Perkiomen River the other day. And, mature adult, it takes 4 years for them to develop this coloring. So a lot of times they're solid brown or they're mottled, and that's a young bird. But the 4th year they have this beautiful mature coloring. And I was at a dinner party last night, and someone said, "What's your favorite bird?" And I hadn't really thought about it. When I was a kid, it was definitely birds of prey. And I had just seen a bald eagle. I said, bald eagles are my favorite bird. Because when you see one, it's pretty stunning. And they are pretty amazing, right? We have a couple of vultures. I kind of lump these in with birds of prey. They don't actually pursue animals. There's a record of vultures pursuing prey, but they generally carry in. And there's 2 vultures now at this time of the year, actually throughout the year, that you'll see. In fact, I saw both these species today on my way over here, and that is turkey vulture, we call them TVs, and black vultures, which have a different pattern. You can see the pattern, and that's really the best way to tell the difference. When they're sitting, or you're driving in your car, and they're sitting on a dead deer or something, it's kind of hard to get a good look at them when you're driving. But when you see them up in the sky like this, the best indicator is this white or grayish pattern that they have on their feathers. And turkey vultures have this sort of two-tone, and black vultures have this this white tip. And the bald eagles have some of that whitish on their too, so you need to take a second look and see how they say turkey vultures fly like they're drunk. They just kind of can't quite keep their balance, and black vultures are a little more steady, but not quite as steady as a bald eagle. Bald eagles are absolutely plain flat. And there's actually some photographs of the two birds in flight. And you can see that the black vulture is a little stockier, a little tighter, a little rounder, and the turkey vulture is much longer. Everybody's favorite woodpeckers, very common around here, easy to attract to your bird feeder, love to get them on the bird count. This is a female downy woodpecker, and a black and white pattern, and it's probably the most common woodpecker around here. It's a tiny little bird, sparrow size, 5 inches maybe. They have this very strong tail, keeps them upright against the tree. And the males look something like this. The males have a little red chevron with a spot on the back of their head. So usually they even at this time of the year you'll see them in pairs. But during the spring especially, you'll see pairs come down into your feeder or to your backyard. And that's the downy woodpecker. And this bird looks similar, doesn't it? Here's the downy again, and here's the other one. So this could be confusing, and it's not always easy to tell the two apart. But you can see the beak on this bird, the bill. It's larger, proportionally larger than the downy woodpecker. And this bird itself is about 6.5 inches, so it's a little bit bigger. It's called a hairy woodpecker. Again, this is a female, and the male has a red chevron or mark on its head. And a great feeder bird. They're really fun to watch, and they'll climb upside down on your suet feeder and work their way into any kind of feeder. They're really fun to watch. So another very common bird, probably more common than the hairy woodpecker, is the red-bellied woodpecker. They really do have a red belly. You can see a little bit of the pink here on this picture, but a lot of birds are named by ornithologists in the hand as specimens. And so when they're looking closely at a bird in hand, they give it a name. And we already have a red-headed woodpecker, so this one was given the name red belly. This is a female red belly, and there's the male, and it's just the extension of the red over the head, and that's distinguished. Very common, kind of loud, beautiful birds, and woodpeckers have a very distinct kind of flight pattern. They kind of flap, flap, fly, and they kind of, when they stop flapping, they go down and up and down and up. So it's something to look out for when the bird crosses your street or crosses your yard. And usually they have pretty clear white markings under their wings as well. This is one of the most beautiful, I think, one of the most beautiful marked birds. It's like a duck, it's so beautiful. It has amazing feathers. This is a northern flicker. It's a type of woodpecker. And it doesn't spend a lot of time on the side of trees. It mostly spends the time down on the ground where it feeds on ants and things like that. This time of the year, you'll see them at your suet feeder, and they also eat peanuts and things like that. So this is a northern flicker. This is we have on this coast we have the yellow shafted flicker, and on the west coast they have the red shafted flicker. And underneath, as they fly, you'll see that they're yellow underneath, and the shafts of the feather are actually. I wonder if I have a picture of that. No, I don't. Are yellow. This is a female, and the male has a malar marking or a mustache on the side of his face there. But when this bird is in the woods or at the base of a tree, it's hard to find. Aside from that fluorescent red chevron on the back of their head, very bright. Otherwise, they're very well camouflaged and just a beautiful bird. This is a nice winter bird here in Pennsylvania, yellow-bellied sapsucker. They're the ones that make rows of holes in fruit trees and other trees, sugar maples, for example. They create little wells of sap, and they actually do eat the sap. And then that opens it up for a number of other birds to come in, and they will eat that as well, including other times of the year. Hummingbirds will take advantage of that, as will a number of warblers. But this is a yellow-bellied sapsucker. Not really a feeder bird, but they will come to activity. So if you have a lot of things going on in your yard, birds are curious. They want to know, hey, what am I missing? You might get a yellow-bellied sapsucker, or you might have them already. If you have a good amount of some mature woodlands in your yard, you may get a pileated or pileated woodpecker. This is a large bird, and we do have them here. We have them breeding in Mill Grove this year, this past year. This is sort of the woody woodpecker of the bird world. Not to be confused, of course, with the ivory-billed woodpecker, which is a similar bird, but really is extinct. They thought they saw one a number of years ago down in Arkansas, but they weren't able to refine that bird. But so I get a lot of calls. Right after that happened, I got a lot of calls saying, I think I have an ivory bill in my backyard. And it always turns out to be a pileated. Even when ivory bill were alive, they were never in Pennsylvania. They never got up this far. Or I used to get calls with people with a downy woodpecker, a little 4-inch bird, saying, I think I have a baby ivory bill in my backyard. Well, when they're born and when they're ready to fly, they're still about crow size when they leave the nest. So even the young ones are quite large. This is a beautiful, dramatic bird, big white markings on the wings when they fly. You can't get this bird wrong. If you see this one in your backyard, it's either a crow or a pileated woodpecker, and usually you can tell the difference. Not a woodpecker, but a bird that spends a lot of time on trees. And you notice how this bird is facing down. A lot of woodpeckers usually face up, although it's not a strict rule. Woodpeckers will go down on a tree, go face down on a tree. Nuthatches almost always go down a tree, walk down a tree, and also when they come to your feeder, they might look upside down as well, but not always. This is a white-breasted nuthatch, a year-round bird. They make sort of a nasally honking sound. It's pretty distinct, and they have this beautiful slate gray, bluish back, that sort of black stripe on their head, and bright white face, and so it's pretty distinct bird. You might think it's a chickadee. New birders might think it's a chickadee as it comes into the feeder. Take a second look, and you'll see that this bird is a little bit bigger and has different markings and feeds differently. It feeds a little differently too, like Sue especially. It's another winter bird, not as common as the white-breasted nuthatch, and a little bit smaller too. This is a red-breasted nuthatch. That's a little bird again. If you just kind of catch it out of the corner of your eye, you might think chickadee or something like that because of the black and white patterns on it. Take another look and you'll see the reddish color, the slate blue, and that pattern, that sort of eye stripe, large, bold eye stripe across the eye. These birds are real good at getting under bark. Their bills are upturned, especially the white-breasted is an upturned bill, so they use that to sort of shovel away or scrape away at bark, and they get the insects that live inside that area. Now, this time of the year, there might not be insects, or there might be insects overwintering in there, but there's insect eggs, and there's also insect larvae and pupa at this time of the year. So different stages of insects can be found through the winter, and they're dormant and waiting to emerge in the spring, and that's what these birds are looking for. That's what suet is all about. People wonder, well, why are we putting out beef fat or rendered kidney fat for birds? What is that? How do they get that? Well, some birds do eat carrion. Some birds will come down to an open deer carcass and eat the fat off it to get through the wintertime. But it also replaces the insect, the high-fat insect eggs and pupa stage that birds are really good at finding, especially if there's no snow on the ground. They really dig through the leaf litter where a lot of this stuff is found and in the bark of trees. And that's where they find this high-fat content food source. And that's what we're doing with suet, replacing it. Now they put all kinds of things in seed and peanut butter and all kinds, which is fine. With suet. Brown creeper. You really got to look for this bird. It's a small brown bird, blends right in with the trees that it climbs, and it's doing the same kind of thing. This bird usually goes up and around the tree and looking for insect life and insect eggs and things like that. Generally will not come to a feeder, but you might get these in your backyard. It's a great bird to list on a count to get a good idea if they're around or not. Birds you might be surprised to see. Everybody thinks that robins are the harbinger of spring, but they're partial migrators. They do move around, but we have robins here all year round. And what happens is they flock up and they go into the forest and they search for food together. Or in your backyard. If you have a winterberry holly this time of the year, they will find it and they will eat everything off it in one day, usually, if the fruit is ripe at once. But they tend to lose a little bit of the brightness of the color this time of the year, but they are around. They really are, and they're just more visible in spring because they start feeding on lawns and open spaces, where at this time of the year they flock up and they sort of move through forests and backyards. Bluebirds also this time of the year. Now, what are they eating? They're usually mainly insectivores, but they also eat fruit. And so winter fruit is a great thing to do. And I have a little handout here what to plant for birds. A lot of these things are fruits that persist through the fall and winter, so that these birds like bluebirds, mockingbirds and the robins have stuff to eat. Because right now there are fruits out there. A lot of the fruits that we have out there that they are eating are invasive plants from China and Europe. And the birds, unfortunately, help spread those because they carry it with them and they drop the seed in a nice little nitrogen package, warm, and it sprouts in the spring, and then we have invasive plants everywhere. But it doesn't have the nutritive value of our native plants. And if you can plant those in your yard, you can actually create a healthier source of food for birds than they might find in the forest even. Great horned owls are one of the early nesting birds. They start looking for nests in early March, so they're around. They're basically rodent eaters for the most part, and they are around in the wintertime, and usually come out at dusk. They don't do a lot of calling at this time of the year. This is actually a summer plumage yellow-rumped warbler. We call them butterbutts. This is a warbler that tolerates cold weather and will eat a variety of foods, including some fruits and seeds, and probably won't get this at your feeder, though. Okay, this is for kids. There's not that many kids here today, but probably won't see Big Bird. And Tweety Bird. See that? See? Roadrunner. They're not really indigenous to this area. More of a western bird. And Woodstock. I was just out at Charles Schulz Museum in Santa Rosa, California. So I had to add Woodstock today. You won't see too many warblers, other than the yellow-rumped warblers. If you see warblers, they're usually lost at this time of the year. I'm trying to think of any other ones that you might see during wintertime. Not really. These are almost pure insectivores, and so they sort of head south to Central and South America, and that's where they are. That's where they're spending their winter. It's warm down there, and there's insects to eat, and then they come back up here to breed. We have a whole variety of warblers, and there you can see some of the characteristics of them: eye rings and wing bars. Certainly the American redstart on the left, and I can't remember the other two. Sorry. And you won't see hummingbirds. If you do, they do. Some of them tend to linger, especially if you have your feeder up. They will. Not that you're keeping them here. It's just that some of them linger well into the fall. I think late October is the latest record, or something like that, of ruby-throated hummingbirds. We have one species here, although Rufus, which is a western species, is tending to show up in more and more numbers. So take a good look, and if it looks like an unusual ruby-throat, it might be a Rufus. And there are hotlines that you can call, or you can call me and say, you never believe what I have at my feeder, and then people will come out. Actually, there's a bird bander. He's based in Schuylkill County. He'll actually come out to your house and capture the bird and band it so they can study it. And so hummingbirds are gone for the most part this time of the year, making their long flight. Baltimore orioles are not around at this time of the year. This is a summer breeder. They like big trees in open areas and open fields, like black walnuts and things like that. Beautiful bird. I mean, this picture doesn't do it justice. An amazingly fluorescent, beautiful orange bird. This is the male, and you won't see them at this time of the year. They're generally in Central and South America. eBird.org, this is the database on which the Great Backyard Bird Count is based, and it's really simple. You just go in and then you'll see the list of birds. After you put in your zip code, it'll only give you a list of birds that are likely for this area. So you don't have to go through all, world 600, 700 species of birds. You're only going to go through the birds that are likely in this area. And so then you check them off, or you put in the number in these slots. Very simple. It's free to do it. It takes about 5 minutes to input all your data. You only have to bird 15 minutes a day. You only have to pick one of the 4 days, or you can do it all 4 days. It's fun to get the family involved and try to beat your yesterday's number. Put a different feeder in this day. You don't have to have a feeder. If you have great habitat, you might get birds as well. But feeders are a great way to bring them close to us and allow us to count them and get a bigger variety of birds, more activity at the feeder. And you just put in all this information. You put in some basic location information, how many people birded, how long did you bird for, done. And you go in day after day and do that, and you can see your stuff being loaded up live. You try to load it as quickly. Now, if you put in something, there is an area for notes, and if you say, well, I think I saw an ivory-billed woodpecker in my backyard, they will contact you by email, and they'll say, are you sure you saw an ivory-billed woodpecker? Can you verify? So don't be afraid of checking the wrong bird, because they'll get back to you and they'll say, are you sure? Because they really want to be very thorough about their records. This is just a backyard habitat. We have a great program at Audubon, Pennsylvania. It's only in the state where you can create bird habitat in your yard, and you can register your yard with us. It's also free to do that. And we just stay in touch with you, and we'll let you know if your town is a bird town like Lower Frederick. Is everybody here from? Is anybody not from Lower Frederick? Okay, good. What township do you live in?
Upper Frederick.
Upper Frederick. Well, we want Upper Frederick as a bird town. That way we can join bird towns. We can join efforts. We got Doylestown Township and Doylestown Borough working together, and Newtown Township and Newtown Borough. So neighboring townships can really work together to improve their sort of ecological footprint. So talk to your supervisors and tell them to get in touch with me about creating Bird Town, Upper Frederick. But it all starts with the individual properties. It all starts with you creating habitat in your backyard, and that begins with native plants. And you can start with this little list here. Plants and native plants. There's lots of resources and sales that are coming in the springtime, and you can buy some native plants, put them in, watch them grow, and create a beautiful habitat, not only for birds, but I'd like to sit in this yard and hang out. I wish this was mine, but this would be a great place for birds and people to hang out. And evergreens, especially at this time of the year, hemlocks, and I guess that's the red cedar. You can see that the yellow warbler eating the cedar berry, or nutlet. This is a great time of the year to have evergreens on the property. So if you don't, that's one of the things to think about for next great backyard bird count is to have some kind of native evergreen in the backyard. You know, some white pine or the hemlock or the cedar or some other ones too. Even arborvitae to a point. And then again, you can register your property for free. You get a little sign if you want for donation, and let your neighbors know that you're creating habitat in your backyard. You can put up some bird houses. I would say late March is a good time to start putting up bird houses. You can leave them up all year long as you're cleaning them at the end of the fall. But birds will find them, and we get everything from, if you have open space, you can get bluebirds, more of an isolated area, or more shrubby or trees, more density. You can get things like titmice and chickadees. Some woodpeckers will take to it. If you have a farm, you can get kestrels, which is a small falcon that feeds on rodents and insects, and screech owls, the bigger box. Northern flickers will take the boxes. So there's a lot of different birds, a lot of different boxes, different size boxes. The hole has to be the right size and all that. We also have a number of birds that sort of invade these homes, especially bluebird houses because it's just the right size. House sparrows, we used to call them English sparrows when I was a kid. That's a European species, very common bird. Not too typical more in the rural areas, but in the city and suburban areas, house sparrows are pretty common. And they're very aggressive. They'll go into a nest and take out the birds that are nesting there so they can take over the nest. As will European starlings. And there's not much we can do about the population of European starlings because there's just gajillions of them. And they're very aggressive. They will go into a box and destroy the nest and then take it over. So I recommend smaller. I recommend if you don't do bluebird boxes, and there's certainly ways online. North American Bluebird Society has ways to sort of deter these invasive birds. But if nothing else, do a wren box. It has a 1-inch hole. None of these birds can get in it other than a wren, and it's fun to watch. And house wrens will, if you leave a shoe outside, a wren will nest in it if you leave it out long enough. They really don't, they're not very picky, whereas other birds are a little more particular. Finally, I welcome everybody to visit Mill Grove. It's, about a half hour from here? It's where John James Audubon, the man, the naturalist, lived when he first came to America. It's a historic home. It's open to the public. You can tour the house. It's a very old sort of farmhouse, but a lot of his original art, original prints are on display there. And so there's a valuable collection of artwork down there, and you can see the detail that he created in his artwork. He was about 18 or 19 years old when he lived here. He only lived there for a couple of years. And he really didn't succeed as an artist until he was well into his 40s. But he started his artwork here. And he also did one of the first scientific bird experiments. He put a silver thread around the bird, a phoebe I think it was, and the bird came back the next year. And he was able to sort of realize that birds leave and they come back to the same place. And that was the beginning of bird banding, or it's considered the beginning of bird banding. And bird banding continues on throughout the country where scientists, ornithologists, and some biologists will capture birds in nets and give them a little bracelet with a very specific federal number on there. And then if they catch the bird again at some point in their life, they can track that bird, where it's been, how old it is, and that kind of thing. So that's kind of fascinating. And that all started down here in Mill Grove. So I welcome you to come down there. I'm based there, although I travel the state quite a bit, pushing this Bird Town program. And thanks to Howard Eskin for some of the pictures, and Debbie McKenzie's my contact down in Alabama, and TogetherGreen.org is one of our funders. And oh yeah, I worked with REI, that was last year. But anyway, there's a couple birds that I didn't mention. They're a little harder to see, but worth looking for. And that's one is a cedar waxwing, and this is a photograph of one. You can come up and look at it. This is a spectacular bird. They're very quick flyers, and they travel in flocks. They have a very distinct kind of flock pattern. When they fly, they kind of, you know how geese kind of stay in a line, but cedar waxwings are as they fly, they scatter. It's kind of bizarre, but it's very distinct. So you can see a flock and say, oh, that's definitely cedar waxwings. And very beautiful coloring. You can take a closer look at that. And then we have kinglets, little tiny birds that you will see. They won't come to your feeder, but they will flit around your trees and shrubs. And it's about this big. It's smaller than a chickadee. And this bird gleans insects, eggs, and other parts of insects off of the leaves. So it's primarily an insect eater. That's one of the few that can tolerate the wintertime here in Pennsylvania. There's this one, the ruby crown, and we also have golden crowns that come down at this time of the year, actually to get warm, because they're coming down from northern altitudes, and they spend their time in Pennsylvania. A little tiny bird, very distinct wing bar there, and just the behavior of the bird, flitting around, like they don't stop, they just keep moving around, and then that's very distinctive of a kinglet, and they also make a little chipping noise as they do that. So a little bit of material up here for you, and I'm happy to answer questions. We'd love everybody to at least contribute one checklist to the Great Backyard Bird Count. That's either Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. Go online to birdcount.org, or you can go onto Audubon Pennsylvania's website and link there. Sign up for it, it's free. They do want you to put your email in, so if they need to get back to you, they can. And then they send you, a newsletter once a year or twice a year in your email. Otherwise, it's a great program, and we have a little bit of a competitive edge. We're trying to make Pennsylvania submit the most checklists of any state, and each year there's a sort of state-by-state competition. And about 3 years ago, we were #1. A lot of that had to do with the backyard program, where we have 500 properties across the state registered in our backyard program. But we'd love to be #1 again. So if everybody just contributes one checklist, everybody in this room contributes one checklist to the Great Backyard Bird Count, we'll be doing pretty well. Plus, we get a lot of good information, a lot of good data when you look outside your window and count the birds. And, if you're new to birding, I recommend, if you have good feeders and they're fairly close to you, you don't really need binoculars, but a good field guide is good. This is the Sibley guide, came out about 10 years ago. And this is the national version, so it's thick. But they also make an eastern version. It's a much smaller version of this book. I think it has a goldfinch on the front, or another bird. But this is one of the good guides. But the Golden Guide and the National Geographic Guide, they're all any of the guides have been updated in the last few years, so they're pretty good. Sibley's one of the best. The artwork is amazing, and just really good descriptions of the birds. He also has books on bird behavior. But I recommend, if you're new to birding, get a field guide, a small field guide, and just thumb through it once in a while and learn about the birds you'll see. And of course, if you want, go check out your chapter and see where their bird walks are being led. I know Mink does bird walks occasionally, don't they?
Yeah, there's been a couple.
A couple bird walks locally. Go out with them. Nobody shuns new birders. We want as many people involved in bird watching and nature as possible. So, thank you for coming out today. Appreciate your time. Are you filming?
Yes, sir. From the website.
Talk to my agent.
I have a lot of questions, but I'll keep it down to 2.
Okay.
How far apart should bluebird houses be on property? And how do I keep squirrels out of the feeders that are on my deck?
Yeah.
Big dog.
Besides it.
Okay. Bluebirds can be fairly close together, especially if you. We have them about 25 yards at Mill Grove, and they're fine with that. The problem is when you have tree swallows come in, they start competing for the boxes. So what you need to do, if you can do it, and have the room for it, is put boxes back to back. 2 boxes back to back every 25 or 50 yards. And you'll get the tree swallows on one side and the bluebirds on the other side, and they leave each other alone. Otherwise, they do a little bit of competition, and tree swallows will just sometimes win out. But yeah, they're both great birds to have, by the way. Tree swallow, there's nothing wrong with having tree swallows nest. It's just everybody loves bluebirds. And bluebirds are a real success story because their populations have come back thanks to the efforts of people, really, putting up nest boxes. And nest boxes really replace mature woodlands, because mature woodlands lose trees, lose standing snags or dead trees. And so every time we put up a tree house, it's really replacing a natural resource to birds. Some birds, need to be in the center of a forest to nest. Pileated woodpecker generally won't nest in your backyard.
How high should you put them around?
Well, it depends on the bird, depends on the species of the bird.
Bluebird.
Oh, bluebird is eye level.
Eye level.
Yeah, about 4.5, 5 feet. It's fine.
My other questions?
Squirrels. Okay, I had a great slide. I meant to show the slide. Squirrels on the deck's a tough one. I have the same problem. It's really. I mean, I tried rubber snakes. The fake out, the whole thing. It doesn't. It's really tough. I don't really know the solution to put it to the deck, to keep them off the deck. Does anybody have any idea? No spikes. I don't use spikes or anything like that. There is this works better for birds than squirrels, but there is a thing called a deck sweep that boaters use, and it's a little mechanical device that it's like a windmill, like a horizontal windmill. And it just, some of them are solar powered, some of them are battery or electric, and it just spins. And a bird can't land on a deck it's mostly for seagulls. That could work on a deck. I'm not sure squirrels would challenge it, but they're it's tough. There's all kinds of feeders also that spin the bird off, spin the squirrel off. I mean, that's a possibility. Any other questions?
I have a tubular feeder which I fill with black oil sometimes. And I mostly attract the small birds. What kind of feeders should I get so I get some of the cardinals and blue jays?
Yeah, peanuts. Something that has a peanut. And there are peanut feeders. In fact, there's this Birds and Beyond, or whatever it's called. Thank you. It's right around here. They have some great feeders. So something that has holes big enough for shelled peanuts, or even peanuts in the shell. You saw some of the pictures here. Those were blue jays, like those red-bellied woodpeckers, love peanuts, and a number of other birds. Cardinals, if you put safflower in with the black oil sunflower, we call it black and white mix, you might get cardinals too. They like safflower seeds as well. White seed. Yes, ma'am.
I've seen a great reduction. I'm not seeing any chickadees, chickenhouses, pigeons. I mean, they used to be all over my backyard. I'm seeing the juncos right now.
Yeah.
I'll be a couple nuthatches.
Yeah. Everything right now. See, I get 2 calls at this time of the year. Either I can't believe all the birds I have in my backyard, or where are all the birds? So maybe it's some of they've relocated, but they tend to disperse and move around this time of the year. A lot of natural food around. We get a cold snap or snow, and you have food in your feeder. You'll see the birds will be there. Just right now, they sort of spread thin, and there's lots of sources around.
My neighbors have gotten a few new cats though that are roaming back, and I was woods out back. I mean, would they leave my area because the cats are around?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the wintertime, they try to find the easiest source of food in the wintertime. So if it's a feeder, they'll do it regardless of the cats.
Well, the ironic thing is my neighbor that has the cats, she's got all the birds because the cats are her language.
Oh, yeah.
We have 9 squirrels. We have 9 squirrels.
9 squirrels.
She's named them all.
Named them.
And then she fed them so much
Yeah.
that they are so big and fat that they scare the cats away.
So big squirrels are the answer to cats. Then you got the problem with the feeders.
Only problem with that is that we have deer coming in the
Oh, yeah. Deer will eat off the feeders also. That's a hard one.
Why don't you raise a hawk?
What's the best thing to do when you find a young bird out of the nest? Should you leave? My husband and I have this debate all the time. He says you should leave it there. I say you should put it back up again.
What do you do?
Okay, young birds out of the nest, not a problem at this time of the year, but it's a very common problem in the spring. A lot of birds leave the nest before they can fly, and that's perfectly natural. That's just the way it is. And they'll follow the parents around as best they can, or the parents will actually follow them and feed them, even though they can't fly. And in a day or two, they'll be able to fly. They're just testing their wings and their movement and stuff like that. So it's best to leave them alone. However, if there's a cat, your neighbor's cat, imminent, death to the bird, maybe you try to put it up on the branch, but inevitably they end up back down on the ground. It's just the way it is. And you have to understand that only 50% of birds that hatch make it to adulthood. And we try to increase that number, but there are some man-made dangers around cats, for example, dogs, and windows kill a lot of birds throughout the year as well. So we contribute a little bit to the population decline in some birds, but for the most part, you should leave it alone. It'll be able to fly in a couple days and be okay. I work with a rehabber, and she has every year a cage full of birds brought to her. Robins, mostly robins. Robins do it. Cardinals, leave the nest before they can fly. And a couple other species, but usually it's robins, and she just has and they're easy to care for and release. It's just that people pick them up thinking that they've been abandoned. They fell out of the nest or they've got a broken wing or something like that. But usually they're fine, and it's just they're testing their movement.
My husband and I argue about whether or not the seed goes bad, especially since I have enough birds around and it gets wet. He says, "Oh, the birds will eat it."
No. Wet seed should be pretty much thrown because it does grow mold, and they can get aspergillosis and other diseases from moldy seed. So moldy seed should be thrown away because it's usually contained in a feeder. It gets moldy. Seed on the ground, natural seed, that they can find and eat just fine. But when we contain it like that and it gets wet, it's bad. It's bad for birds. And it's good to clean your feeders too. In the wintertime, it's a little tougher because it's freezing outside. But during active periods, if you can get in there once a week or once every 2 weeks and clean your feeder, just with a sort of like a dish soap. Make sure it rinses it really well. It's good. It helps prevent the spread of disease. A lot of birds touch a feeder. They have some kind of disease like pox or something like that, and it spreads to other birds. And in past years, experts have said you got to stop feeding because birds are passing a certain disease around. We haven't had too much trouble in the last couple of years, but cleaning the feeder is not a bad idea, especially when you get
I
wet.
have a question. Does deer ever eat bird seed?
Yes, deer do eat bird seed. Absolutely, deer will eat everything. Deer will eat.
Because I have a feeder that will be emptied out sometimes in a day, which is this big.
Yeah, deer do.
How do we do
Deer
that?
will eat birds and bird eggs if they get hungry enough. I have video proving that they will eat. They'll go right into a bird's nest because a lot of birds nest close to the ground, and the deer have no problem going in there because all their natural food is gone and the population is out of whack. So get out there and hunt.
Hey, Steve. Couple questions and just a quick Cooper's Hawk story, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
With respect to cleaning birds' homes and things like that, is it wise to leave if there is a nest for other birds? Do they reuse? I know eagles will come back specifically to their home, but can you do that, or is it best to take it out?
In a nest box, you want to take it out.
Okay.
Yeah,
And are there times of the day or food sources, natives and what have you, which, generally I know birds would be good to see in the morning or perhaps in the evening, but is there any resource that we could see if we're looking, for example, of a junco or some unusual bird, times of the day to count, particular species of birds?
Oh, good question. In the wintertime, we have a snow cover. It doesn't all bets are off. You can watch your feeder all day long. You'll get different birds in throughout the year. But during the down season, or when there's not snow on the ground, generally dawn and dusk are great times for birds. Cardinals in particular love dusk. You see them very active, and robins as well. But early morning, birders are early morning people, and that's the best time to see most species. They get active just as the sun's coming up. But wintertime, it's whenever the food is around.
Right. Okay. If I could just say, the
Yeah.
Cooper's Hawk was very unusual. We had two experiences with Cooper Hawks. One on Germantown or Skipback Pike, where there was one in the middle of the road. It turned out that it had a deep laceration in the neck, and I did take it up to the ARC. Unfortunately, they euthanized it because those birds apparently don't do well in captivity when they heal. The second one, Lisa and I were coming down from, what's that lease up there in New York, down 81. Nonetheless, there was some kind of rat or a large animal that was in the highway, and there was a Cooper's Hawk that stirred as the cars were coming, which we were one, and it couldn't get the lift because it was carrying the animal, and we ultimately, unfortunately, caught it on our A-pillar of the car. The bird careened off to the side of the road. We stopped. We were able to pick the bird, bare hands, pick the bird up, and put him in our car, in the passenger seat. Lisa goes in the back seat. The bird's stunned for about a half an hour. I guess it's just sitting there not really looking intently. We got some pictures and video. And then an amazing thing, the bird really started to stir, and it looked like it was back in action. And we had the window down about 3 or 4 inches. And we're going 55, 65. This bird jumped up on the passenger seat, then jumped out the window, and then literally took off from the car when we were going 55, 60, and had I'll never forget that, a bird that could do that.
You didn't get a speeding ticket?
No speeding ticket, no.
That's amazing. That's pretty cool. Yeah, birds sometimes get knocked out and recover from it. A lot of people say, the bird hit the window and I took it inside and it recovered. A lot of times what happens with those is that they're hemorrhaging and you just don't know it. And so glass windows that's a fascinating story. Birds will come down to roadkill. A lot of birds get killed feeding on roadkill. Red-tailed hawks will come down to roadkill, and bald eagles will come down to roadkill, and red-tailed hawks.
We had a truck behind us, a pickup truck, and I can't imagine looking ahead, and this bird takes off from her car, and almost the other guy clipped him, unfortunately, but he made it.
Steve, just to bring up a point, has everybody here seen the bald eagles here at Green Lane?
Yep.
Pretty much
We're on top of our
Yeah, we've got known 4 nesting pairs of eagles, Spring City, Oaks, on the prison grounds, and that I know of, and then we've been watching the ones at Green Lane for 7 years. Right now, there's been a lot of talk because they were afraid that the birds had left the area. I'm the guy who was talking to Steve about the eagles today. I saw a pair of them today at the boat launch, okay, at the lake, and deciding which goose to have for lunch. Well, anyway, crazy. But anyway, their nest, if everybody has seen the nest, and it usually was in that same tree. Well, the reason it's not there this year is because the tree is gone, not because the nest is gone. The tree is gone. It came down in that big snow in the past. But we didn't know where they might nest again. Hopefully they would nest here at the lake again. And we've got a couple of trees picked out for them, but they apparently haven't decided.
Is there even an invitation?
But they're still here. I actually saw 3 bald eagles today, an immature and two mature eagles today together. So we know that at least there's a real good possibility that they're still here, that very same pair.
And by the way, if you live in this area and you're sitting in your kitchen doing a great backyard bird count, and whatever flies over counts. So you can record a bald eagle if it flies over your property. And sometimes they're pretty high up, so you got to take a look at it. Snow geese flying over, or Canada geese, or whatever flies over your house, you can count it on the great backyard bird count. So thank you. They're great. It's an amazing recovery story. It really is. And there's something to say. It makes us a day, especially extra special.
Steve, you could do a high-tech bird count. The webcams now that sense movement. It's an inexpensive thing. You put it in your window. You can record it through this. There's a software which will show you the periods of which there's movement.
Right.
You could take your 15 minutes and perhaps compress it.
Yeah, you could.
And there's no doubt of what you're watching if you're archiving it.
Time-lapse photography, if you just get a day's worth of 30 seconds. You can do that. It's more fun to do it live. It's a high-tech enough. You got to put it in the computer. Anything else?
Any more questions?
Thank you.
All right. I want to thank Steve for coming today, and Birds and Beyond is here today, and they actually left me with a stack of coupons here for the store, 20% off. So leave them up here, and we have members of the park board and the bird town here. If anybody wants to hang around and talk to us, And we have snacks in the back too, but please help yourself to them. So, thanks everybody for coming, I'm glad everybody's able to join.